One day, while the Osaka High School students were on a field trip on the ship, an accident occurred and the ship sank. All of the students died in the accident, including our main character, Amiya Hiroto. After they died, their souls went to the afterlife, but some of them couldn't stop worrying. Shimada and Minami, two students, tried to persuade everyone to accept what had happened and remain calm. Amiya was upset after seeing Narumi, who had also died despite his best efforts to save her, including sacrificing his own life. Everyone sat in confusion and despair. Then they all heard a divine sound emanating from above. It was the voice of God Rodcourt. He informed them that they were the chosen ones. Students felt relieved to finally receive guidance from a divine being. Then Rodcourt announced that everyone present would be given a new special power. They start a new life and have their own fate. Then they would be reincarnated in a place other than Earth. However, they were still given the option of being reincarnated into another world with their memories intact or being reborn on Earth with their memories erased. Amiya believed that reincarnation would be a good thing and a dream come true, whereas others preferred to be reborn normally without any powers. Once the normal reborn cycle had begun, Rodcourt began taking names one by one of those who would receive new powers and reincarnate into another world. He bestowed upon them 1 or 3 unique skills and abilities, which he transferred to their new lives. Amiya reflects on his troubled past. His parents died when he was very young, and he had no siblings or friends. The most difficult part for him was having to live with his dad's relatives, who would not cry a single tear if he died and would instead be grateful to receive his insurance money. He was delighted to have the opportunity to develop special abilities in a completely different world with an ordinary family. However, when Rodcourt called out his name, another student named Emiya stood up and received special abilities. Emiya had no idea about this until now, and she was unsure whether it was possible. However, upon closer inspection, the Emiya's appearance resembled his own. The god bestowed upon him 8 powers, far exceeding those of any other person. All students referred to it as God's favor. After all of the students' reincarnations were complete, God breathed a sigh of relief. When he turned back, he noticed Amiya was the only student still left. After Rodcourt confirmed his name, he admitted that he made a huge mistake by giving Amiya all of the powers and fortune that were supposed to be his. Rodcourt claimed that it was now impossible to reclaim Amiya's powers or grant him new ones. Amiya questioned what this meant for him. Rodcourt responded that Amiya would no longer be able to receive or have any kind of blessings for himself, and he would have to live in the worst possible situation among all of the other students. Amiya saw no point in being reincarnated right now, so he asked Rodcourt to let him be reborn normally on Earth. Rodcourt informed him that it was no longer possible because the choosing period had ended a long time ago. He was astounded to learn how miserable his life had become even after his death. He questioned why he was the only one who received nothing. Rodcourt told him that as compensation, he would change Amamiya's soul into a massive empty core filled with incredible magical power. But he will be incompatible with all forms of magic in the world. He will be reincarnated. As the reincarnation began, Amiya expressed his disappointment in having enormous capacity but being unable to use any magic. Rodcourt felt sorry for him and warned him that the journey ahead of him would be extremely difficult. His future would be limited, and he would face far more isolation than anyone else, leaving him with nothing but despair. Rodcourt attempted to remain optimistic, but Amiya was irritated by his bad luck, which was entirely his fault. When he reincarnated, he was shocked by strong electricity and fell to the ground in pain. It was a guard who warned him not to stand up to them. The guard informed him that the next experiment would begin in 30 minutes and that he should prepare. Amiya remembered everything, including how he died in a shipwreck and was reincarnated in such a miserable life due to some stupid god's oversight. He was transported to the world of origin. It was similar to Earth, but magical. Amiya's current life backstory is that he was born to a prostitute. They then sold him for money as if he were an object, with no regard for his well-being. Following that, he was purchased by a research facility, which allowed them to conduct numerous experiments on him. They discovered that Amiya, unlike the other test subjects, lacked magical talent. He was not compatible with any of Earth's 7 magical elements: water, fire, wind, and light, life, space. He was initially thought to be incompetent, but when they discovered a massive magic source inside his body, which gave him an advantage over others, they considered the possibility that he possessed a previously unknown element. Meanwhile, Amiya noticed a rat laying on the floor and stretched out his hand to test his magic, and the rat stood up and walked normally. He assumed it was dead, but when the researchers saw it, they informed him that the rat had already died, so it was not life-type magic. It was how they discovered Amamiya's ability to control the dead. Researchers were astounded by the discovery of a new element for controlling the dead. They announced Amamiya as the world's first death mage. After some time, they summoned Amiya from his confined space to have a conversation. They told him that it was up to him to decide whether he wanted to be used as a testing device, given that he would have some freedom. He was interested in how much freedom he could have and go outside, so the researchers told him that they had great expectations for death magic, so he'd get some leeway if he produced some results. After that, he continued to practice his magic and learn how to create new types of magic. He trusted whatever the researchers told him and focused all of his efforts on training. However, the researchers were concerned that he might become worse as he gained more control over his magic. Both his heart and brain were outfitted with explosives in case of any disobedient thoughts, and he also had a small tracking GPS inside his body, as well as a robotic right eye with a camera. He was subjected to many limitations and monitoring, but they still viewed him as a potential risk. They eventually devised a terrifying solution, and he was summoned to a room with the instruction that he would be examined. But the reality was much scarier, and they bound him completely with restraints everywhere. He became frightened, afraid of what they were doing to him. Several doctors arrived and began performing operations on him. He was in excruciating pain both then and when he regained consciousness after a while. He couldn't say or do anything. He felt his body but could not do anything. It was because the operation he underwent was designed to stop his ability to control his body and magic, rendering him unable to move his fingers on his own. He resembled a living dead now. They had complete control over his body and could now proceed with their experiments without concern. Amiya was now a puppet for them. He felt deeply hurt and depressed, knowing that all he could do now was wait for his life to end in the same miserable way it had begun. He couldn't take it any longer and started calling out for help on the inside, but nothing worked at this point, and it continued for 10 years. After 10 years, a new researcher joined Amiya's experiment team. At this point, he looked very frail and weak, with his bones visible. The new researcher, like the others, didn't care about him at all. He simply wanted to solve the mystery of a new type of magic and exceed his predecessors. Amiya couldn't do anything. There were ghosts in front of him. They inquired about his well-being. He didn't think it was worth answering them, though. He noticed the new researcher and hoped his ways were better than the others. He could communicate with the spirits, telling them that they would never understand how evil these people were, and they conducted countless experiments that were not only painful but unbearable. The spirits felt bad that they couldn't help him, but he told them not to worry because being able to speak with someone in this place was enough for him. If he hadn't had those spirits to talk to, he would have gone insane a long time ago. The ghosts thanked him for calming them down, as they were still unable to reincarnate until now. He understood that his ability to see and attract ghosts was due to his death magic. The ghosts told him they wanted him to get out of here, but they didn't know how. Amiya remembered his happy old memories of his classmates and wished they would come to get him out of there, but nobody ever did. After a month, the new researcher was still unable to make progress. He blamed it on Amiya, hitting him hard in the face and becoming insanely angry with him. The spirits inquired as to his well-being, but he was in excruciating pain in his face. The scientists decided to go all out and up the test to its maximum capacity. Amiya was in excruciating pain, and the ghosts tried to stop the device to save him, but they couldn't even touch things. The spirits apologized to him, and he was through. He began releasing an insane amount of magic, which continued to increase until it was 10 times more potent than the world's current most powerful mage. Following the constant release of magic, it finally dropped to 0. Amamiya stopped responding, and he died. The researcher noticed he had died and became afraid of losing his research subject, holding his head. Then more magic emanated from Amiya's body. It was fascinating at first for the scientist, but then Amiya reached out and strangled him to death. His eyes darkened, and he regained full possession of his body. He stabbed the scientist's body with his bare hands. Then he continued to the other room. Other researchers couldn't believe it and had never expected it to happen. Amiya was enraged, hateful, and vengeful towards everyone. He was only thinking about killing everyone. He kept running around, killing everyone one by one, and couldn't feel any pain from their weapons because his body had died. Amiya had died, and his soul took complete control of his body. He had intentionally transformed himself into an undead. Demonstrating his incredible abilities, he brutally murdered everyone and went on a rampage. He continued to kill everyone he encountered along the way using his magic. It felt great for him to have complete control over his powers and body. He discovered that there were other survivors just like him, and the researchers were attempting to create another death mage like him. They were all the same as him, unable to move their bodies. Amiya used his magic to free everyone so they could control their own bodies. He led them to the outside and warned them that there could be more enemies waiting. When he got to the exit, he noticed all of his classmates waiting outside. He was relieved that they had finally arrived to save him, no matter how late. To his surprise, everyone prepared to attack Amiya mercilessly right away. He didn't understand why they'd attack him. They were all sent here after learning that an extremely powerful undead outbreak had occurred. They came to kill the undead who had gone on a rampage. They managed to kill Amiya simply because he let his guard down around them. Norris entered and expressed disgust at the death magic, which had single-handedly wiped out the entire lab staff. Then another figure appeared, Amiya Hiroto, who had gathered all of Amamiya's powers and destroyed his body. He couldn't help but become enraged at the other Amiya and all the students for it. He wanted to kill everyone and would never forgive them, even if he were reincarnated. After he died, he saw the god Rodcourt again. He didn't expect him to last long. Amamiya became enraged and attempted to punch the god, but he was unable to touch him. He vented his rage on the god for bringing him to such a life in the first place and putting him through an even worse nightmare than his previous one. The god admitted that he had done something horrible to him, and as a result, he can let him live peacefully in the next life. The next life would be in a place known as Lambda. He would be reincarnated there before everyone else, but he intended to kill them all. He begged God to grant him special abilities because he couldn't mistake anyone else for him right now. The god refused to give him any power and began his reincarnation immediately, stating that he could not allow Amiya to murder his classmates. God told him that Lambda was lagging behind others in terms of development, and that he wanted Amiya to help improve it himself. God told him to see it as a training period. Amiya had just gone through hell and was now being transported to the next world. The god expressed his gratitude to Amiya for creating a new type of magic, hoping that he could forgive him for failing to provide adequate compensation. God's words only fueled Amiya's rage, and he vowed never to forgive him. However, the god cursed him for eternity, hoping for Amiya to abandon his revengeful thoughts and choose the best way to end his next life, and promising that all of his pain would be relieved in his next fourth life, returning him to his normal reincarnation cycle to Earth. Amiya was reincarnated for the third time.